Welcome to today's episode of Hospitality History, where we will be taking a true crime turn. Today, we'll be delving into the tragic case of Emma Cummins, a young barmaid who worked at the Criterion, a famed restaurant located in bustling Piccadilly Circus, London. Emma's story is one that is filled with sorrow and scandal, set against the bustling backdrop of London's hospitality industry in the late 19th century. The events that led to her untimely death are shrouded in sadness, and it's important that we take a moment to reflect on the life of this young woman who experienced so much hardship during her short life. As we explore the history of the Criterion and the lives of barmaids during this era, we hope to better understand the events that led to Emma's tragic passing. Additionally, we will also be taking a look at the subsequent report on barmaids that was prompted by this scandal, written by Eliza Orme, who visited 100 pubs interviewing barmaids up and down England. But let's start with the story that started everything. This is the tragic case of Emma Cummins. Emma Cummins was likely born in 1859 in England, during a time when life was difficult for many people, especially those who were poor. Although there is limited information available about her childhood, we can make some educated guesses about what her life may have been like. As a young child, Emma likely lived in a modest home with her family, possibly in a working-class neighborhood, a background frequent among barmaids at the time. Her parents may have struggled to make ends meet, as many people did during this time. They may have had to work long hours to provide for their family, leaving Emma and her siblings to fend for themselves much of the time. Despite these challenges, Emma would have had some opportunities for play and socialization. She may have played with other children in her neighborhood, gone to school, if her family could afford it, and participated in simple leisure activities like games and singing. As Emma got older, she may have had to start working to contribute to her family's income. It was common for children in the 19th century to start working at a young age, often in factories or as domestic servants. Emma's family may have needed her to start working as soon as she was able, which would have limited her opportunities for education and personal growth. Overall, Emma's childhood would likely have been challenging, with limited resources and opportunities. However, she would have been surrounded by a close-knit family and community, and may have developed a strong sense of resilience and perseverance that would serve her well in the years to come. In her 20s, Emma Cummins was drawn into a barmaid's occupation. As discussed in our previous video, The Scandal of Victorian Barmaids, we learnt that this occupation was filled with enterprising women and was a job that could earn women independence. The profession paid better than most work available to women at that time, was less physically demanding, and with many opportunities to advance to managers. Additionally, barmaids got to work in the fanciest of bars and hotels, unlike their male counterparts who ran only the roughest of pubs. Emma was likely drawn to the glamour of the Criterion Hotel, known for its opulence and grandeur, with a clientele that followed suit. Emma would have been exposed to a world of luxury and excess that was likely very different from her upbringing. The Criterion Hotel in London was an opulent and luxurious establishment. The interior of the hotel was just as lavish as its guests, with ornate decorations and fine furnishings. One notable feature of the hotel's interior was the stunning Piccadilly entrance. The entrance was a grand hall with a high ceiling, decorated with intricate carvings and marble pillars. A sweeping marble staircase led to the upper floors of the hotel, while the floors were covered with rich carpets. The hotel's dining room, the Piccadilly restaurant, was a sight to behold. It was decorated with frescoes, ornate plasterwork, and a stained glass skylight. The room was filled with elegant furniture, including dark wood tables and high-backed chairs. The overall effect was one of refined luxury. The Cree was the pick of the basket, as proprietors Spears and Pond boasted, and their barmaids were beautiful. It was against this backdrop Emma first met Lieutenant Henry Ponsonby in the summer of 1881. Lieutenant Henry Ponsonby, not to be confused with Major General Sir Henry Frederick Ponsonby, was 40 years old at the time he met Emma Cummins. Although there is little information on Ponsonby life, we can look at the average life of a lieutenant in 1881 to understand the context of this story with a bit more nuance. In 1881 London, a lieutenant would have been a member of the British military, likely living a disciplined and structured life. As a relatively junior officer, a lieutenant would have had some level of responsibility over a small group of soldiers and may have been involved in training and administrative tasks. Lieutenants would typically have received a salary, which would have varied based on their rank and length of service. The average salary for a lieutenant in the late 19th century was around $200 per year, which was a respectable amount for the time. Outside of work, a lieutenant in London in 1881 would have had a variety of leisure activities to choose from. These could include attending social events and parties, visiting museums and galleries, participating in sports such as cricket or rugby, or simply socializing with other members of the military. Overall, life as a lieutenant in 1881 London would have been a mix of duty, responsibility, and leisure activities, with a focus on serving the country and maintaining a strong reputation in the military. The contrast between the life of a lieutenant and a barmaid in 1881 London would have been significant. As a lieutenant, Henry Ponsonby would have enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a decent salary and the privilege of being a member of the upper class. He likely had a good education and access to opportunities for advancement in his career. His life would have been characterized by the luxury and prestige that came with being a member of the British military and the elite society that he moved in. In contrast, the life of a barmaid like Emma Cummins would have been much more challenging. She would have been part of the working class and likely earned a modest wage, which would have been barely enough to support herself. She may not have had access to formal education, and her future career prospects would have been limited. Despite the advantages of being a barmaid over other limited options for women at the time, life would have been characterized by hard work and long hours. So after Emma Cummins and Ponsonby started a romantic relationship, Ponsonby left for Africa. In the late 19th century, Africa was still a largely uncolonized continent with vast unexplored territories, and various European powers, including Britain, were actively seeking to extend their influence and control over the continent. In the 1880s, Britain was primarily interested in securing its trade routes to India, which required control over key ports, such as those in East Africa. The British military was involved in several conflicts and expeditions in Africa during this time, including the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879, the First Boer War in 1880-1881, and the Mahdist War in Sudan from 1881 to 1899, among others. They were also involved in diplomatic efforts to secure territories and establish protectorates, such as in what is now Kenya and Uganda. It is likely Ponsonby was posted to one of these places. On his return to London in November 1881, Lieutenant Henry Ponsonby resumed his romantic relationship with Emma Cummins. He asked her to leave her job as a barmaid and live with him at Oxford Terrace in London, to which she agreed. This request might have made Emma feel happy and hopeful for a more committed and stable future with Ponsonby, who was a decorated naval officer and scion of one of England's finest families. Within a week of their living arrangement, Ponsonby and Emma had an argument that led to their relationship's termination. Ponsonby left Emma with only PS4 and settled a week's rent before departing. He sent 2 friends to inform Emma of the breakup, leaving her feeling devastated and alone. They warned her to seek medical attention, and when her doctor examined her, she had contracted a disease from Ponsonby. This news must have been heartbreaking and humiliating for Emma, who was now facing the reality of being abandoned by the man she loved and the potential long-term consequences of their relationship. It is unclear how Emma Cummins felt about this sudden abandonment, but given that she had agreed to leave her job and live with Ponsonby, it is possible that she was devastated by his departure, both financially and emotionally. It appears that Ponsonby did not keep his promise to provide her with financial support, as she was left with very little money. The sudden end of their relationship, coupled with the loss of her income, would likely have left Emma in a very difficult situation. It was then, sadly, that Emma decided to take her own life by ingesting phosphorus. Emma Cummins' suicide note was released to the press by her sister, in which she described the unbearable pain of her infection and urged others to take her experience as a warning. She hoped that her death would not be in vain and that others would be spared the same fate. Many people see Ponsonby's denial and minimization of his relationship with Emma as a proper dick move. His actions suggest that he was attempting to protect his reputation and avoid any repercussions for his mistreatment of her. The coroner censured Lieutenant Ponsonby for his part in the tragedy and stated that the inquiry had been one of the most painful he had ever presided over. Despite Ponsonby's denial of any involvement with the deceased woman, the coroner's jury quickly affirmed the police ruling of suicide. The foreman, citing their intense feelings of disgust and abhorrence, added that Lieutenant Ponsonby, although not legally, is morally responsible in causing the death of the said deceased, and further, he is deserving of the severest censure. Despite the strong condemnation from the jury, the coroner administered nothing more than a finger-wagging "let this be a lesson to you" lecture. As the inquest came to an end, and the coroner's damning words hung in the air, Lieutenant Ponsonby knew he had to make a quick escape. But it was easier said than done. A crowd of several hundred people had gathered outside the premises, eagerly waiting for his appearance. They wanted to see the man they believed to be responsible for the young woman's tragic death. The police force present was outnumbered, and it became clear that the crowd had no intention of dispersing. The lieutenant remained in the kitchen of the premises connected with Providence Ball, hoping for a way out. A neighbor appeared on an adjoining wall and proposed that Lieutenant Ponsonby should escape over the wall and through the adjacent yards into Edgware Road. However, the custodian of Providence Ball refused, fearing trouble with the premises occupants. It was clear that a more significant plan was necessary. A reinforcement of 20 police constables arrived, and a four-wheel cab drawn by a stout horse was procured. Lieutenant Ponsonby was quickly escorted to the cab amid the groans and howls of the mob. 2 constables entered with him, and the remainder charged the crowd, which in turn charged the vehicle, yelling execrations on its occupant. The cab made its way through the streets, followed by an eager crowd of both sexes. The mob was relentless, and the vehicle was stopped momentarily on Edgware Road, where the windows were broken. The situation became even more dangerous as the cab was driven along Praed Street, still pursued by the angry, shouting, and threatening mob. It was a tense and frightening moment for Lieutenant Ponsonby, but he eventually made it to safety. The events of that day had taken their toll on everyone involved, and the tragedy continued to reverberate throughout the community. Lieutenant Ponsonby had narrowly escaped the wrath of the angry mob, but he couldn't escape the censure of the coroner or the public's judgment. The temperance movement was quick to use Emma Cummins' tragic death as a rallying cry in their efforts to end the employment of women as barmaids. They argued that the combination of long hours, low pay, and the constant exposure to alcohol and male patrons created a dangerous environment for women and pressed for a ban. However, Eliza Orme thought otherwise. Eliza Orme was a trailblazing woman in many ways. Not only was she a leading figure in the early feminist movement, but she was also the first woman to earn a law degree from University College London in 1888. In 1893, Orme was appointed Senior Lady Assistant Commissioner to the Royal Commission on Labour, where she oversaw a team of Lady Assistant Commissioners. The commission conducted extensive research into the working conditions of women across different industries and trades in the UK. Orme's specific task was to investigate the conditions of barmaids, waitresses, and bookkeepers working in hotels, restaurants, public houses, and other places of refreshment. Part of the reason for Orme's particular interest in the lives of barmaids was a moral panic then underway about the supposed connection between this job and sexual exploitation. The case of Emma Cummins, the barmaid at the Criterion who had poisoned herself with phosphor after being lured into life as a kept woman, was a significant part of this panic. Orme took charge of the barmaid question herself, visiting nearly 100 pubs and speaking to almost 300 people. Her research was a significant part of the Commission's wider investigation into the effects of women's industrial employment on their health, morality, and home life. Despite the pushback from some quarters, Orme remained a steadfast advocate for women's right to work in any industry, regardless of gender norms or societal expectations. Her work with the Royal Commission on Labour helped to shed light on the working conditions of women across the country, and her commitment to gender equality and social justice helped pave the way for future generations of women. Rather than finding a link with barmaids, sexual promiscuity, and drunkenness, she discovered quite the opposite. This report is where I gathered a lot of research for my previous video, The Scandal of Victorian Barmaids, if you would like to learn more. You can watch it here. Thank you for watching this true crime video about Emma Cummins, the barmaid who tragically took her own life in 1881. Emma's story highlights the darker side of the barmaid profession and the exploitation that some women in this line of work faced in the late 19th century. We hope that by exploring her story, we can shed light on the social and moral issues of the time and bring attention to the ongoing struggle for workers' rights and fair labor practices. It also highlights the societal stigma surrounding women's sexuality and the impact it had on their mental health. Emma's story is just one of many that serve as a reminder of the ongoing fight for women's rights and the importance of creating safe and equitable working environments for all. What do you think Emma Cummins' tragic story tells us about the treatment of women in the late 19th century and the continuing struggles for women's rights? Please let me know in the comments. We hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking as I did researching it. Don't forget to subscribe to Hospitality History for more true crime stories and historical content. Thank you for watching. As an independent video maker with a passion for history, every like, subscribe, and share helps me bring you more informative and entertaining content like this. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all things history and hospitality related. Until next time, cheers!